I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News. And this week on Right Wing Insanity Report, we're going to be taking a look at the new alt-right that has been infiltrating the traditional, if you can call it that, traditional GOP, and has been moving the Overton window to the right now for a couple of years. To discuss this important topic with me is Amanda Moore. We've had Amanda on the show before. What makes Amanda's viewpoint interesting is she actually infiltrated the alt-right a couple years ago, undercover, as, you know, pretending to be an alt-rightist herself, and got a bird's eye inside view of what's going on within that group. So I wanted to have Amanda on to discuss this with me. Welcome to the show. So glad to have you back.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
So let's just, on background, talk a little bit about how this project of yours came to be. Initially, I think it was 2022 or thereabouts that you started sort of noticing issues and decided to infiltrate these guys. What's the background there?
This was actually a week after the election.
Okay, so 2021. All right.
2020, yeah. So November 2020, I worked in live events. My business was gone. I lost my home. I didn't have a lot going on for me. And I needed to occupy my time. So I was like, oh, I'll try to go to this Trump rally, walk down the road, go to it, maybe cover it, try to sell something, a blog post or whatever. And then I went to the next Trump rally, and then I went to the next Trump rally, and that was January 6th. So it kind of snowballed from there.
Quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
So you were there at the Capitol on January 6th. Were there people you had already made contact with that were present there that day?
No. So I grew up evangelical. And then when I was maybe 12 or so years old, I became a libertarian, and I kind of became agnostic, and then finally an atheist. I'd always been very political. I've been involved with the Libertarian Party up until Michael Brown and Freddie Gray died, the first Black Lives Matter movement, because I was like, don't we hate the cops, guys? And people were like, there's some other people we don't like more, the Black ones, So I left the party around then. So I was always very politically minded. But I didn't plan to go undercover. I just thought I would go record these rallies, and it was going to be something historical in the same way that Baltimore after the death of Freddie Gray was historical. I did not really anticipate, doing it for a year or traveling around the country to do what I did. So the initial rallies, I kind of was just there having short conversations with people and, kind of recording some of the speeches. I didn't really get more in depth until CPAC in February of 2021.
Okay, let's talk about CPAC. So conservative meetings, they have 3 or 4 of them a year. Some of them are overseas, but starting, I would say, I think actually 2021 might have been the first one where they started having the America First PAC at the same time. Definitely there was more alt-right present there. Generally the younger kids. And I think a lot of these younger kids see the traditional GOP as more of Gen X boomer, kind of clueless people that aren't really going to make anything change in the country. And there's definitely a shift more towards, kind of a neo-fascist viewpoint with these kids. So was that eye-opening for you, or had you seen that sort of thing happening already?
Well, I knew it was happening. So the first APAC was actually in 2020. So it was the second one.
It was the second one.
I almost went, but they were requiring your bank account information to go, and that's crazy.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? That's bizarre.
Completely. Yeah. And he was like, Nick Fuentes was like, you can mail me cash only or give me your bank account information. And I was like, I'm not doing either of those things. So I didn't go. And I regret it. But, yeah.
Okay. I don't blame you. That's a little bizarre. Was it, what did he think that was necessary because he couldn't take a credit card, or was he trying to hide money, or, okay.
Because it was it was a month after J6.
Right. And wasn't he at one time on the no-fly list, or was that a different Groyper?
Yeah, no, that was him.
Okay, so that might have been part of it too. All right, interesting.
Yeah, but when you go to these events, Turning Point USA, CPAC, these things that are supposed to be mainstream, there is this whole subculture, and with every year it's getting more mainstream. It's being embraced more and more by these, the vanguard. Not even the vanguard, because at this point that would be the rhinos, the Republicans name only, the never Trumpers. That's the establishment people, and then you have pro-Trump people, but they're not pro-Trump enough. And so,
Right.
yeah, there's this whole ecosystem that goes around the country with Turning Point USA and CPAC.
Indeed. And I'd say there are even some folks that think Trump doesn't go far enough, so they think he's a traitor, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. He was pretty much on board with a lot of their agenda. So let's talk a little bit about the individuals. I call them sometimes the suit and tie Nazi crowd. They're a little bit less in your face. They understand that there's value to not dressing up in combat boots with red laces and shaving your head, right? They want to sort of bring their viewpoint to the masses, and they think a good way to do that is in small doses, right? So, you know, maybe you question immigration. You start with question illegal immigration, then you start to question all immigration. Then you're like, wait, we need a white nationalist country. Let's start deporting people. So there's a whole process to that, I think. And it's this underground sort of ecosystem that you're talking about that has been very effective, in my opinion, of moving the traditional GOP further to the right. And a lot of these guys do have connections with the GOP. So I kind of liken it to after, you know, Bernie Sanders on the left got a lot of the young progressives involved with the Democratic Party. One of the things that they wanted to do was take up, you know, positions in the central committees inside the party, because they all of a sudden had this realization that that's where the power lied, the political power lied, right? So if you get into these state level party positions inside the party, you can start to influence the platform. You can start to influence, you know, those that are being endorsed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the same thing happened on the right, but in a more nefarious way. So walk us through a little bit of the things that you saw in regards to the ways in which they wanted to reform the traditional GOP party.
So one of the groups, well, I guess the main group that I kind of met people from was a group called Republicans for National Renewal, and they are still together. They have people in every state. One of the guys was a precinct chair in Michigan, though he recently lost his re-election to a convicted felon. So things are going great in the Michigan GOP. My guy was named Shane Trejo, and I actually, after I was undercover, somebody sent me private chats that many of the guys I had known had before they knew me. And in those private chats, he would refuse to say that he was not a Nazi. So, like, we went from that to a convicted felon. I guess maybe it's an upgrade. So congratulations, Michigan. But they have an entire book, a guidebook. It's literally the Tea Party, you know, plan where they're supposed to run for a precinct chair, get involved in your local young Republican at the county level and at the state level, and you can kind of shift the culture. And that is true because these guys are in the New York Young Republican Club. They are in the Young Republicans of Texas. You know, one of them, one man, Alex Nelson from the Pacific Northwest, told me he wanted to turn the country into a friendlier Nazi Germany. He was a member of both the Oregon and Washington State Young Republicans. And it's to create, you know, legitimacy. And also, like, Young Republicans traditionally go on to become, you know, presidents, presidential aides. They work in Congress. Like, it's a very well-connected organization.
Indeed. And I think another example we've had here in California, for example, there's a guy whose name is Oliver Kravarik. Oliver is a Capitol insurrectionist. He was inside the Capitol. He's a Groyper. He was part of the Iron March Forum. He had a registered account on there, which Iron March, for people that don't know, is an extreme neo-Nazi ideology. It spawned, the Iron March Forum spawned Atomwaffen Division, for example, other domestic terrorism on the far right. His brother is Victor Kravarik. Victor is member of Patriot Front. So, I mean, really clear picture of who the Kravariks are. Their father, Tony Kravarik, was the chairman of the San Diego GOP for a decade. So definitely connected within the traditional means of that party, and also working to try to push, you know, obviously mainstream politics to the right. So I think that your guy, Sean, isn't the only example of this. I think there's many of it. Let me ask you this, though, because what I'm fascinated by is the youth. Obviously, these are young Republican groups. What is appealing about the far right to these young guys? Why are they attracted to this ideology in the first place?
You know, I think, you know, you see some of them have started off as libertarians, especially because Young Republican is anybody under 40 you can join. And some of these guys, they're aging out and they're like, let me start a new spin-off club that is 43 now, like they can't let go. It's like the only power they've ever had.
That's so funny.
It's so weird. But I think
that is weird.
Some of them start off with that libertarian angle, especially the ones who are like closer to like above 30. And kind of with Trump, that a lot of that movement went further right, which is why I left it, right? And I think some of the younger ones, they're, some of it was the pandemic. Like, just I think a lot of radicalization happened during the pandemic, people being extremely online and not having a distraction from kind of going down rabbit holes and spiraling. A lot of them are very aggrieved. They, but they're perceived grievances. They're not necessarily real.
Right.
There's like, they don't like equality, a lot of them. And some of it, some of it is economy stuff. Some of it is, we want it so that it can be one parent working and one staying home. They don't say if that's what people want. They just mean women should stay home. But, they want.
What do you think is driving that in specifics? Is it that maybe they're sort of rebelling against their moms being in the workforce and they have some sort of romanticized version of what a family looked like previously? Like, what's driving that? Because I've noticed that too.
Yeah, I think it's some of that. And I think it's definitely all romanticized versions, because you see this right now with Steven Crowder, his wife and him getting a divorce. Yeah. And you see a lot of these reactionaries who are all women should stay home with their children and being like, why is she asking for money? Why is he paying for her lawyers? And it's like, well, that's what happens. When someone stays home with the kids. Like, that's right. What the price you pay if you break up. And so I think, a lot of them have clearly not ever lived, and would be my guess. Right. They probably had two working parents, because they just don't really seem to have any understanding of how finances work when you have one. And I think some of it is like, competition in like the job market and at school. It's not that things are being handed out to people who are not white men, but they're also being given, like, everybody is able to apply for stuff now, and they see it as like,
they don't want the competition.
Yeah. And a lot of these, some of these people are like losers, like, like they're living, like literally living in mom's basement, and they're like 38 years old. And, that it's easier to tell yourself, this is happening to me because like Black people and women are, eligible for stuff now. They're everybody, every woman, every Black woman gets a job, So I think it's like a variety of things. But I do think that the internet during the pandemic just was so bad.
So bad. No, I agree with you, because, going on Telegram, you can get in contact with people that think exactly the same way as you do, or even a more extreme version of that. And you get into these Telegram rooms with those individuals and everything just gets ratcheted up, right? And you get more radicalized into these viewpoints. So I want to ask you about going undercover. So at one point you decided to mic up. So you had a setup where I think you were hiding a little mic in your bra.
Yep.
Which is great place to put it.
Yeah.
Were you ever nervous that one of these guys might suspect such a thing, or any harm could come your way because of that? Was that scary at all, or?
The very first time I did that, like J6 and stuff, I just had like a handheld recorder in my purse. It wasn't until I went to CPAC that I was like handheld recorder and mic in the bra. And I was like a little nervous in the beginning that people would like realize, but I got over that very fast, because it was very clear to me that nobody was thinking that. There were maybe 4 or 5 times in the time I was undercover where people would be like, there's a journalist here, we got to kick him out. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I wonder who the undercover journalist is. And it was never me.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, I fit in fine. This is great. I probably should have been more cautious and more nervous than I was, but that's like a personal defect. I think a reasonable person would have been more concerned.
I feel you. I've got the same defect. I barrel in and then I'm like, oh wait, maybe I should.
Yeah, exactly.
I got you there. So what are some of the conversations that you witnessed that maybe didn't make it into your piece that you think are important?
Yeah, I think so. There was some stuff that was like directly about like how to kind of recruit people on, the boomer CPAC end. Okay. And a lot of that is just, like, some of it is kind of in the article, but it's not, I think like the explicitness is not really in there. How to dress, how to talk. And also something that was talked about on and off was like, we should go to like the events that Democrats have and see how they function and see how they run stuff. Of course, the problem with that is that there is no left version of CPAC, right? Like it's like weird cult stuff. Yeah, exactly. So I think they kind of
really isn't. You're right.
There's nothing. So I think they were like hit an obstacle with that, but that had been something that initially I had heard floated, which, you know, is like smart, but just, you know, kind of one-sided viewpoint there. A lot of stuff about how there might be like Chinese people and there might be like, you know, like Nigerian or Nicaraguan kids who get adopted by white people and they like love Trump and like the parents of these kids might donate money and Chinese people might donate money. But are they really like us? Are they really, you know, like part of our stuff? And really the focus should be like, what do the white people want within the movement? And if you want to support it as an outsider, you know, you will take your money, but maybe you really shouldn't be like involved. Right. And I think, yeah. And so a lot of that came from like, whoa, like some of the, you know, whoa and ban and stuff was going on in the news at the time. And I think that kind of prompted that. Just a lot of about how the party is going white and we should not have a big tent. And something that I thought was interesting is that some people that I talked to were very, something they were upset with Trump about was when he would say, oh, the Democrat cities are burning. And they were like, but they're American cities, you know?
Wait,
and it's like,
oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so it's like a priority of like nationalism over. And I think the idea there is really like, you can not let people be Democrats anymore, but Chicago's going to be America no matter what. You know what I mean?
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have not heard anyone say anything like that, but that does check with that they would feel that way. There's like sort of a hierarchy of enemy, right? So, yeah. So that's interesting. I want to go back and talk a little bit about the young Republicans in general. So not New York and specifically, I think has become much more extreme. You know, you had the situation, I guess, in God, what year was that? 2018, where there was a big fight that broke out with the Proud Boys at one of their meetings, and a couple of other things. Did you see, like, at any of these meetings, you know, chairmen for these different areas, whether Washington State, Chicago, California, whatever, were they ever having like sub meetings inside these, you know, America First groups, whatever, to try to discuss ways to push that forward, organization or anything like that?
So this is now leaving undercover work and going into like the journalism I've done since. So just to be clear, like I was not privy. I was a member of the New York Young Republican Club, but I never went to anything. So so it is New York, DC, and Texas where this is the most problematic, and then pockets within Florida and Arizona. So obviously New York City has kind of gone rogue. DC has been completely taken over by Groypers. And then Texas.
Oh, really? I guess I didn't realize that. The DC one. Huh. That checks out.
They all the normal people are gone. Now they are, you know, they had an election. It was a woman who was the chair. They had a bunch of Groypers come in because if you go to the Christmas party, you become a member. That's how they sell tickets and how they sustain membership. And they just started chanting about how women shouldn't hold office, they shouldn't vote, they shouldn't have jobs, and they voted her out. They got a bunch of gropers and groypers in, and yeah. And the chair.
I see what you did there. Or groping groypers.
Groping, yes. And then they got like someone on the board helped plan Unite the Right in Charlottesville. I mean, you know, another one on the board works for Kim Buck. People on the board work for Matt Gaetz. Steve Cortez's daughter is on the board of DC. So yeah, it's a disaster there. And then in Texas, the original Young Republican group in Texas actually split with the Texas GOP. They were like, you guys are, you know, out of touch with reality. The Texas GOP chairman, a guy named Matt Rinaldi, he's like all the worst stuff, right? So they split with him. So then they made a new Young Republican group and it ended up being full of people who love Hitler. Shocking. And that's the official affiliate of the Republican Party of Texas, is the like pro-Hitler Young Republican group now.
So this is insane. Let's go back to the DC group. Who is on the, you're saying on the current board. So there's somebody who, is it an Identity Europa person, or who's the Charlottesville connected
So
individual?
his name is Isaac Smith. He actually ran for local office here. He ran for ANC in like a part of DC where it's like predominantly Black. Because of course he did. That's where he lives. His roommate at the time is actually a woman who like helps run all of the fundraising for the January 6th people that stand on the street corner by the jail.
The Freedom Corner people?
Yeah, the street urchins, as I call them, yes. So he ran for office. It came out in like the Washington Post, obviously the local section, like this guy, you know, helped plan Charlottesville.
Right.
He says he's reformed, but let's be real. Everybody that is, I mean, the DCYRs is just, it's bad. It's really bad. Like everybody that was, most people left. I mean, there's very few people that are still there that were in that club a couple years ago. So yeah, but they know they're all well connected. I mean, again, Matt Gaetz is got someone there, JD Vance, Kim Buck. I mean, that's their staffers are on the board.
That's crazy. How much influence do they have though? Enough? Like I feel like they have enough influence to actually switch things over further to the right. But I don't know that they have the same amount of power, for example, as the actual GOP does. Like, where do you see them playing in within the bigger picture of that, like the right-wing world?
Well, the DCYRs that specific group is kind of an anomaly because it's, you know, this is a very political city, but they're not the most connected. But like in a place like Texas, where, I mean, they're an official affiliate. So like half the states in the country, their state GOP will affiliate with the local Young Republican organization, which is traditionally like done through one.
Do they get delegate votes?
They don't get, so they don't get delegate votes, but like, so like, all right. So in Texas, where they had the spinoff group, people in the spinoff group are also precinct chairs. They're also, you know, they're running for local office, right? So a lot of times, a lot of presidents were members of Young Republican groups. So there's like this huge connection. So Texas is like a uniquely awful case because the state GOP is in complete shambles right now. You know, it's like a civil war within the Texas GOP itself, and the Young Republican is an extension of that. Other states, there's less connected, so there's less influence. It just really depends. But of course, the problem with DC is that all these people like also work in politics now. And before, it was predominantly people who did not work in politics who were in the club.
More on that topic, you wrote a second article for The Nation about the war within the Young Republicans. And I believe that you were interviewing people around the convention at that time. Walk us through a little bit about what you discovered there.
Yeah, so by coincidence, my piece about being undercover came out in The Nation during the Young Republican National Convention, which I had already planned to go to. And my article was not supposed to be up for like another month. And then they were like, great news, we bumped it up. And I was like, oh, this is so funny. They were like, do you want us to hold it until Monday? And I was like, no.
Okay, so people didn't realize that you had been undercover quite yet. Is that how that worked out?
No, people knew. But the president of the New York Young Republican Club, his name is Gavin Wax. He was in the story, and he was also at the convention. And I knew he was not going to like the story, and he did not like the story. In fact, all of the New York Young Republican Club really hated my story, even though they're barely in it. Something that's happened after I was undercover is people have reached out to me about Gavin Wax in particular. They've sent me private chats. They've sent me, you know, old information about him and kind of his history. So I think he, you know, I've written about him before that article several times. So he already did not like me. And I've been trying to get people to talk to me in the YR. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to go. Maybe physically being there will make people talk to me. And it worked because everybody saw Gavin yell at me. You know, it was very interesting. I sat outside. I wasn't allowed in the main room where they were like voting and everything, but I just sat right outside and listened. And, you know, for their party, the last night or whatever, Carrie Lake was a speaker talking about how, like, you know, all these conspiracy theories that, you know, on stage, and a lot of people are like, I don't believe any of this. She started talking about, you know, Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, she's very pro-Russia. People were walking out and talking amongst, you know, themselves. Like, you know, I live in a district where we have a bunch of Ukrainian people, and they're like a really reliable voting bloc. And like, what, like, this is crazy, like we're not pro Putin, and like walking out, and people had planned to protest, and I think that like there was some like behind the scenes stuff that kind of encouraged people to not, but people still walked out. It wasn't as big as it had been planned, but people were individually very upset. A lot of people they understand Trump did not win the election. I mean, there are Trump supporters who understand Trump didn't win the election, and that speech was very polarizing. And it's the kind of speech where like New York, DC, the Texas spinoff group, and then these Arizona and Florida chapters. I don't want to say they're like complete anomalies, because like obviously the Republican Party kind of did this to itself, but they are, but like, there are plenty of things that they are off their rocker on that is not in line with other people who vote Republican. And it's just, really watching it happen. And it was very much in people's faces in a way that maybe it hadn't been in the past. If you're in the Ohio Young Republican Club and you do have that reliable Ukrainian voting bloc, you've not had to go to a Young Republican event where somebody's telling you like Russia's the best, like they should definitely take back Ukraine. So I think it was a little eye-opening for some people. It certainly people were familiar to me after that weekend.
Well, that's just it, right? So not everybody that they, qualify as being a rhino, which is Republican in name only, is on the left or is not like having really super right-wing beliefs, right? There's just so many places where you just can't go there, right? Like if Trump actually literally lost the election and that's provable, that doesn't mean because they hold far-right beliefs that they're going to get on board the election was stolen train, right? They still have brain cells left. So I could see that being the case. But let me ask you this. For those individuals that see themselves as being on the right still, and they see this stuff happening, and they get called a rhino, and they're like, yeah, man, I'm not a rhino. What are you talking about? I'm just not an idiot. Where do they find themselves now at this point?
So very interesting case here would be the Speaker of the House in Texas, who is a Republican. So Texas in the year 2022, I think, had maybe like between 30 and 50,000 abortions. I honestly can't remember, but it was a high number, okay? So last year, from January until September, there were 34 abortions in Texas. Now, right. So people, and this happened under the current Speaker of the House, they call him a rhino. They say he's not, it's crazy. I mean, it's like, there's not another word for it. It is delusional.
It is crazy.
From reality, And so there's like not another world in which like, I am like having to be like on the same, like they're like basically like the Speaker of the House is no different than Amanda, the Antifa journalist. And I'm like, this is the only world in which, like, how are you here? And so, I don't know, because these are powerful people. And now he's being primary because he's so much of a rhino. He might really lose his spot. And that is happening all over. I know people in the Young Republicans who were involved who are now just like, I am totally disengaged. I'm not participating anymore. Or I know some that have left, like the ones who were more like left leaning to begin with, more like, I'm probably libertarian. Where do I go? They're like, I went to the Young Democrats meeting, like they're like, I can't do this anymore. Hang on, let's
talk about that for a second, because I do find that interesting. So part of what I see happening, and not just with the younger folks, but also in the mainstream Democratic Republican politics, a lot of these individuals that see themselves as maybe being libertarian or on the right traditionally, but they're never Trump, right? They're never Trumper, do find themselves shifting over into the Democratic Party. So my question is that going to end up ultimately pulling the Democratic Party more to the right? Or is there some space in which, like, I think libertarians and like Bernie Sanders supporters, for example, might have a lot in common, i.e., civil liberties, or Bernie Sanders supporters and those that think something should be done about the income inequality in the country. They see that as a problem. Well, maybe we could all get behind something like Medicare for all. I don't think Medicare for all is like a left-wing issue at this point. But is there enough commonality there where they can find ways in which to work together, or is that ultimately just going to end up pulling the Democratic Party more to the right and more to corporate America?
So I think when it comes to like the people who are like left-wing libertarians, you're the ones who are like, fund the schools and the roads, but like not the wars. I think that is different. When you have the never Trump or the no more Trump people who are like, I'm a Republican and I'm going to vote for Biden, I think that's where the problem is. Like, because the libertarians, a lot of them, I mean, look at Cato puts out good work about immigration and the border. I mean, they put out like damning studies and damning information about Greg Abbott and what Greg Abbott is doing at the border.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah,
so do you think, let me ask you that. You're talking about the think tank, which is, I mean, Cato's pretty far right. They are libertarian. Is the reasoning for that, do you think that they would be behind the business reasons as to why we need immigrants, we need the labor, et cetera? Is that what's motivating that?
So I don't know if it's the policy of the actual think tank, but they're like, there's a specialist I've been trying to get to talk to me for like a month, and that's who he writes for. Because he's one of the few people that's like writing the kind of stuff that I'm like looking for. So I think it could go any direction. I think, you know, like when I was libertarian, like it really was just like the border like sucks and like shouldn't exist. You know what I mean? I think some people really do feel that way. At the very least, people think that Greg Abbott shouldn't be like amassing an army of various state militias, you know?
I mean, really, this is what Greg Abbott is doing is very much anti-government in a way. You know, it's 100%. Funny. It's funny to me how some of these guys, they ultimately, it's like you want to do a meme of how they see themselves and what they actually look like, right? So they see themselves as being totally jackbooted, right? That my freedoms are gone. I've got a boot on my neck, blah, 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 blah. And the reality is like, it's not true. You are so free. You're so free. You're able to run around saying all the things that you're saying. Like, what world are you living in where you do not see yourself as being free? And then you get to the base notion, and that's that they want the ability to tell everybody else how they have to think. So, which it ultimately is them taking freedoms away from other people. So it's, I mean, there's a sort of irony to it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like control. It's just control. It's like
control.
Over every issue they perceive as moral, even when it's not a moral issue. Abortion is not a moral issue, but they see it as one. So they want to have, you know, gay marriage is not a moral issue, and yet for them it is. Yeah, and it's very, you know, but yeah, I think that like the people who are like, I'm still a Republican, and I think that is where I think that I think the Democrats are going to like capitulate and like move to the right. Of course, we've already seen this. We saw this with the border. We saw this with Biden. I mean, you know, you can't just return people to Mexico, which is something Biden said he would do. And Mexico is actively right now saying you can't return people here.
Right. No, it's crazy. I mean, Biden's border bill would have been embraced by the GOP a decade ago. And the Democrats would have found it extremely far right and said no to it. And the fact is, now we're so far to the right in both parties, as I'm agreeing with what you're saying, that Biden's bill, which is like should be a GOP wet dream, is being like, oh no, that's terrible. We can't vote yes on that. That's crazy to me. Yeah.
I mean, it's completely. I mean, it's so hard to fathom, to understand. I mean, when I read that, the first thing I did is like literally, there's like an international law. You can't just place people in Mexico. And you know, I think what's very telling is that over the summer, Texas tried to do that, and Mexico said no, and then Biden tried to do it, and when that fell, Texas started doing it. You know, SB 4 is what that was, and it's like, well, we're just doing what Greg Abbott wants. Like, and if the federal government doesn't control the border, the federal government doesn't control anything. So if we're just going to capitulate, like, I guess Greg Abbott's president now. Like, you know what I mean?
No, I mean, we went from Joe Manchin being president to Greg Abbott being president. That's where we are. Or the parliamentarian. I don't know. It depends on what day of the week it is. I mean, the crazy. So let me ask you this. I have a fascination, moving in a different direction now. I have a fascination with anarcho-capitalists because these are guys that ultimately self-identify as being anarchists. I would not, I think that's ridiculous. They're not anarchists at all. They want extreme right-wing libertarian things to happen, right? They want raw capitalism that's totally unregulated, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you see that on the spectrum? I think is problematic, and I'll tell you why. You know, guys like Peter Thiel, who are extreme billionaires that have been funding a lot of super right-wing causes for a long time now, you know, his deal is he's just a greedy guy that wants to make more money, and he knows the way to do that is through deregulation, and how do we get deregulation? We get everybody pissed off at the federal government. We destabilize the democracy a bit. You know, this is a guy that's advocated for seasteading. Let's put all of our corporate headquarter buildings out on, like see things like where you would see an oil rig, except it's going to be like a corporate headquarters. So, I mean, that's his viewpoints, right? I want to get away from government regulation. So I understand guys like that. I get their motivation. But how do they convince all of these other kids that this sort of anarcho-capitalist ideology is a good thing?
I know it's not a cult, right? But it's like almost cult-like. But you know what I mean?
It is 100% cult-like.
Yeah, it's really weird. And I think some of it is just the whole like temporarily embarrassed millionaire, or I guess billionaire, like thing. And then, it really is like the same. It's another way to get the control that you want without having to like directly advocate for it. Because I mean, what I've always thought is weird about when you start to get off the deep end of libertarianism, which is really like most libertarians at this point, is like, I want to deregulate stuff. I want free market, this and that means that
child
corporations
labor, cool.
Corporations can lie to you, and people could sway. Right. Whoever has the money can lie, and the poor people can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
And it's very, I don't know, it's just also weird. Wasn't there like a documentary or something about the anarcho-capitalists?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a weird group of guys. And, I see them as very much different than the Groypers, the Nick Fuenteses, and whatnot, because that group understands that income inequality is really deep right now and bad for the country. Like, if you look at some of the problems that those kids diagnose, they're right about the problems, right? It's just the solutions are very bad.
Yeah.
But they get the problem where these ANCAP guys are just like, no, free for all. And they don't seem to understand that the only people benefiting from that system are those at the very, very top.
Yeah. I honestly, it's something I don't understand how people get swindled into it. Like, I assume a lot of it is like crypto money, or like people who got,
100%,
right.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
definitely part of it.
Even if you're not like a multi-millionaire, if you get, if you bought Bitcoin early enough, you got $1 million, $700,000 to your old self, you're a billionaire,
Right.
And it's just like, these are the policies I like now. I don't know. It's a super weird ideology.
It is super weird. I don't know. It's conflicting though with some of the other things that we're seeing on in the sort of new alt-right. I don't know. I like the term that you use, new alt-right, because I don't really know what to describe this thing we're in right now. The alt-right, I think, is dead, but it is a form of the new alt-right. I think that's kind of a good way to describe it. So now we're headed into, this presidential election cycle. It is definitely Trump. That is the GOP nomination again. Like, here we are. What are your thoughts of what's going to happen over the next few months?
I think, people are going to get more excited the closer we get. I think, right now it's like hard to rally. I mean, not his rallies, but like his supporters join stuff. I think that we'll see more of it as we get closer. Yeah. I'm hoping that people on the left kind of wake up. And I don't mean like the left, but just like left of center, wake up a little bit, because I feel like we're falling into the same 2016 trap where it's just like everything is fine, except it's not even fine. At least in 2016, people were watching the debates and they were seeing Little Hands Marco, like they were seeing the insults and
Little Hands. I forgot about that.
And I feel like now all of the like Trump stuff is kind of abstract. I mean, I don't know how many articles I've seen about, oh my God, this new plan, Project 2025. And it's like, how many times can mainstream outlets like act like they just discovered this when,
I don't understand. We originally talked about, in fact, on Right Wing Insanity Report, Project 2025 well over a year ago. I don't think people were really paying attention to it, but it is a really devastating plan if you want to like kill democracy in the country. Yeah. And I don't think the Heritage Foundation, Koch brother money, all this stuff, I mean, that's where they've always been headed. I think the Koch brothers would if you, the one that's still alive, I should say, I think self-identifies as extreme right-wing libertarians, but I would say they're more of that kind of anarcho-capitalist thing that we're talking about. They're very wealthy. They want deregulation. They want all the power. They don't care if you have to kill democracy to get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always been their end game. And I think that they've just been steadily chipping away and working towards where we are now. I mean, what we have, I think, with SCOTUS is another prime example of this, right? Leonard Leo's connections with the Heritage Foundation, with, extreme traditional Catholic beliefs. You know, that's why we have anti-abortion judges, right? That is his beliefs, and he was willing to spend a lot of money to get that to happen. So there's definitely sort of a crossroads of all of these things, and we're heading in that direction. Amanda, I don't think, I think we have a problem either way, right? So if Trump wins the election, obviously God knows what he's going to do. I think he's capable of writing a lot of really nefarious executive orders and doing other things. If he loses the election, I don't actually believe that anybody that would believe it, that already they thought he won the last election, even though he lost. That's just going to be much worse, I think.
I agree.
And they're still not going to accept. Yeah. So I don't know where that leaves us. Like, we're in uncharted territory. What do you think? We talked a little bit about the immigration. What do you think the other hot button topic is right now besides that with these folks specifically?
God, I feel like my whole life is immigration at this point. I guess still DEI or whatever, CRT, whatever the third iteration of that's going to be. I feel like that is still like kind of making the waves, but you know,
I agree, especially with the Groypers.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this is where these two things sort of mix together, right? So the DEI stuff, this is obviously racially motivated, right? We don't want to have anything. People forget that Trump had an executive order in place that forbidded, like, it outlined companies from doing any sort of DEI training, right? That got overturned by Biden, one of the first things he did, but that was in place for many months. So this was Trump saying, no, you cannot make your corporation safer for, you know, groups that are not white and male. That's infringing on the white male's constitutional rights, which is insane, right? But that's sort of where I could see them bringing that stuff back again, 100%.
When I was at some event at Trump Doral when I was undercover, it was like a QAnon. It was Moms for America, Women for America First. I don't know, whatever the hell. It was QAnon. And Robbie Starbuck's wife was talking, Landon Starbuck, and she was talking about how CRT is like so that Democrats can make your children their sex slaves. I mean, it's just like so when you
what does that have to do with critical race theory?
Everybody is asking this. I mean, not anybody in that room, but outside of that room, everybody is asking. I mean, it was just like, and I'm like,
hang on. If we teach critical race theory, we'll end up with sex slaves. Like, where?
Because it'll make your children weak-minded, and then they'll be susceptible to grooming, and then that's when the Democrats swoop in and make them the sex slaves. So, and this was like, but nobody questioned this. Nobody around me questioned this. And in fact, people were like, I want to adopt kids who have been victims of child sex trafficking. And I'm like, I think if you think CRT leads to child sex trafficking, you should not adopt it. You should be adopted. You should be on a list so people cannot adopt kids.
Exactly. I agree with you. That's crazy.
So, I think they're like really talented at making any topic intersectional. Because if you just say it comes back, I mean, immigration, it's about child sex trafficking too. Anything, as long as you can make it about hurting kids, you are able to just really run with it. So I think, you know, who can say what they'll come up with between now and November? There's so much time.
I mean, given that like the majority of, from what I see, of kids are being hurt right now is by right-wing extremists. It's the irony here is just really, to me, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right. So the other way in which these things, I think, the immigration thing and the DEI thing are kind of like, you know, coming together is because they're both motivated by white nationalism. I think that's pretty obvious to anybody that's been paying attention. And obviously all of these young Republicans that are infiltrating and trying to change the system really are closeted or not so closeted at this point, white nationalists. You know, one of the things that Trump did in his last term was he hired a bunch of people from John Tanton organizations. I've talked about this on the show before, but John Tanton was very much anti-immigration, obviously. He wanted to, in fact, expel people. He wanted to get rid of birthright. He thought that should not be constitutional, so that would require overturning the 14th Amendment. That's crazy. But you'll see all of this stuff in his writings. Trump went ahead and appointed 7 or 8 different individuals from John Tanton organizations into ICE into DHS. So these are folks that are in charge of immigration. Like this is the one part of government where you would not want these individuals to be placed with any sort of power. So I do think that a second Trump term would be that, but much worse. I feel like I think he's become more extreme. Trump has. If you listen to his like recent speeches, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And I think, you know, again, in Texas, you see, so Super Tuesday, the people who are donating all this money in Texas, the billionaires who are funding the right-wing movement, like the extreme right-wing for decades now, you know, they cleaned up. They did great primaries to primary, and everybody who wanted to impeach Ken Paxton, you know, Ken Paxton is filing lawsuits against people. I mean, it's just out of spite. It's retaliation. It's completely, and a lot of what is happening in Texas, they are leveraging this border stuff. And you can see, you know, even Abbott's progression, like the invasion rhetoric. I mean, a few years ago, that was taboo. And people that I expected to not say that, or who would have in the past been like, don't say, you know, can't say invasion, they say it now without hesitation, without even thinking about it. So I think the entire culture of the right has shifted. I think the Overton window, famously, again, is moving to the right. And I think, you know, I think what Abbott is doing is, if Biden wins, you know, he's destabilizing the federal government and making it so that Texas could be its own like nation state, and you know, kind of laying the groundwork for every state and nation. And then if Trump wins and is, you know, like really wins for real, and is in office, you know, I think he's like really modeling a blueprint for Trump to follow. Something that Trump did under Trump, we had Title 42, where you could return people to Mexico. And when that expired, you know, that immediately opened up the space for people who had wanted that for so long, and they finally got it under the guise of COVID. You know, they're desperate to get some version of Title 42 back. And it'll happen. And this time it won't be
I think it will definitely
COVID.
happen.
Yeah.
It won't be because of COVID. It'll be something else. You know, I mean, that's exactly it. Initially, Biden left Title 42 in place too. Like, it was still in place, like I think the first year and a half of his term. Yep. So I think that speaks to how far right the country shifted. I don't think it's just the Republican Party, right? It's just they've pushed the rhetoric so far to the right that what seems like sort of middle ground speak at this point really isn't so middle ground. Yeah,
completely.
What are you working on now?
Texas
Texas
stuff, just tons of Texas stuff. Working on some stuff about the billionaires funding everything, as well as some stuff on the all the immigration things that Abbott is doing, and like the general progression of the Republican Party of Texas, because I think that the country is going to model that. I think they're just leading the way. So as their party turns much further right, I think that is a good indicator of what'll happen nationwide.
Yeah, I feel like Texas is definitely that in the forefront of that. Who do you think is worse at this point, Florida or Texas?
Texas. I mean, I think Texas, because it's really, really taken over. Like, I mean, people, it's so weird. So where Fort Worth is, Tarrant County, it's like the largest county GOP in the country. And they're lunatics. I mean, the guy who runs it, he's so crazy. He's always fighting with me on Twitter. If I mention him at all, he'll come fight with me. But you know, they're hosting Tucker Carlson. They're defending meeting with Nick Fuentes. I mean, at the end of the day, at least Ron DeSantis never hosted Nick Fuentes, but the Republican Party of Texas did. Like, you know, so.
You know, what blows my mind about that is I think everybody is really clear at this point that Nick Fuentes is incredibly anti-Semitic. I mean, there's been enough clips that have been shown in the broader world of him saying incredibly anti-Semitic things that there's no way that the GOP party of any state can say that they don't know that that's the case. Like, I mean, it kind of surprises me that they're okay embracing a guy like that, knowing that people are going to be like, yeah, why are you embracing some anti-Semitic guy? And they seem to be not worried as that being a consequence.
When I wrote about the Neo Young Republican group in Texas, I was like very clear, like, here is this person with Nick Fuentes at a pro-Hitler rally. You know, here's this person sharing pro-Hitler posts. Here's this person talking about the Jews. It's very clear. It was other people's own words. And that was used. It came up when the Texas State Republican Executive Committee voted on whether or not to affiliate with this group. And then when they had to rehash it after the Nick Fuentes meeting, I mean, these people, like the guy who runs Tarrant County, were literally like, oh, that's just, you know, like online opinions. I mean, it's just, there's like, it's a free speech issue. I mean, it's like, it's objectively not. And it's like,
it is not a free speech issue. He will have his free speech regardless of whether you decide to associate with him. The problem is that they all have decided that free speech means free speech free from consequence. And it does not. If the GOP party in Texas wants to associate with a rabid anti-Semite, there will be consequences for that. And they need to not bitch and complain about the consequences when they come and say, you're stepping on my free speech. No, we're not.
Yeah.
We also have free speech. We can call out your bullshit.
Oh, no, not you. You don't know. One of the SRAC members that I know, she and I were talking about it, and she said, you know, I remember when the log cabin Republicans wanted to have a booth at our state convention, and it was this whole thing, and we couldn't do it because then if we let them pay to have a booth at the convention, we would be endorsing their lifestyle. And she said those same people who said that are now saying we have to let Nick Fuentes speak, but it doesn't mean we endorse what he says. And she's like, what?
Wow.
Because like one of these things is bad and the other is not. And this is where you choose your battle. So yeah, they're completely, you know, they don't care.
No, it's gone to the point if I say freedom in any title of any organization, I'm like, they're not about freedom.
Or free women for America first, patriots.
Right.
No, none of those things.
Wait, no. Freedom for trad wives.
But also, I want a trad wife, but she needs to have a lot of money and not be lazy, okay? So that when I leave her, she doesn't take any of my money.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So for folks that don't know what a trad wife is, I feel like we need to explain that now. So trad is short for traditional wife. So these are stay-at-home moms and wives that have created like this whole ecosystem of channels on TikTok and Instagram, other places. And they pretty much post these videos of them like almost like 1950s idealized, romanticized housewife bullshit. Like how else you describe this? But a lot of these guys on the far right, like, you know, they want to embrace that sort of viewpoint of women, right? They're just, you know, wives and they do what I tell them to do. I know, but you know, the other thing that goes along with that is you also see a lot of these dudes, you know, that are supporting this idea of traditional wives. A lot of these guys that support that kind of viewpoint of women also say these really horrific things when it comes to, like, you know, really, I'm going to call it pedophilia. Like, it's okay if they're only 15 years old. You got to get them young and groom them to be the proper wife. Like, they say this stuff out loud and they don't think it's problematic. Or, you know, Andrew Anglin at one point was making this whole argument about, well, I mean, look how they used to do it back in the day. You know, girls as young as 13 were, you know, having sex and getting married. And you're just like, that doesn't mean it was a good idea, Andrew. Yeah. Like, what the fuck? I mean,
yeah. Talk about, I mean, but it's a CRT that's doing the sex trafficking.
It's a
CRT.
It's a CRT. Like, it's so off the normal beaten path at this point. Like, you know, it's like you may or may not like Biden, agree with Biden, or, you know, I have issues with Biden. I think he's done some good stuff. He's done some bad stuff. Yeah. But regardless of how you feel about Biden, he's like in the spectrum of like a normal president, right? Yeah. The things we're discussing here today, the things that Trump represents, they absolutely are not. And I think that's just the main differentiation point at this, which is sad that that's where we're at. That's kind of ridiculous.
Right. You can vote for the last president ever or Joe Biden.
You can.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Those
it's a real bummer. It sucks. This is what
it's
we're
crazy.
At. I mean, this is a man who had me and a bunch of other people tear gassed. We could hold a Bible upside down in front of a church, and foreign reporters going back to their countries and being like, "America is a messed up place," you know?
Yeah. Seriously, that's where we're at. Amanda, if people want to find your work, like, where's the best place for them to do that? I think, do you have a Substack or some place where you're publishing independently, or are you just doing freelancing now? What's everything?
Yeah, I've got a Substack. It's turtlediaries.net. And then
Turtle,
yeah. When I was undercover, I was a little turtle avatar on Twitter.
Oh, right on.
And then the Turner Diaries, the Turtle Diaries. I've made a little
100%.
little joke there.
Hang on, let's explain the Turner Diaries now for people that don't know. I got you. So the Turner Diaries is this horrible white supremacist handbook, for lack of a better thing. It's actually a novel, but they use it as a handbook. Yeah. But, you know, at the end of this, there's the race war, and then there's Day of the Rope, where they hang everybody that's not white and on their side. Like gay people get hung, Jewish people get hung, black people get hung, brown people, like all of them. So Timothy McVeigh sort of brought that into the broader dialogue because he had like boxes of the Turner Diaries at his house when the FBI raided it. So anyway, Turtle Diaries is a great play on words.
It's Turtle Diaries, and then I'm on all social media, but mostly Twitter at NoTurtleSoup17.
Right on, Ron. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.